The night my brother humiliated my daughter, something inside me shattered. And in that breaking, I found clarity. This is not a story about revenge. It's about rebirth. This is the true story of how I stopped trying to save my family and started saving myself.
Before we begin this story, let me know where you are listening from in the comments below.
My name is Larissa Crane. I'm 38 years old. And what I'm about to tell you today will forever change the way you see your own family. I still remember every detail of that afternoon. The soft hiss of the rain against the windshield, the wipers squeaking like they were tired too, and the way my stomach tightened a little more every mile closer I drove. I wasn't heading to a birthday party. I was heading into familiar crossfire, disguised with balloons and cake. Kendall sat beside me, cradling a small wooden box in her lap. She'd built it herself in her school's woodworking class, sanding every edge until her tiny fingers blistered. She even carved Uncle Gage's initials on top, shaky but proud. "Do you think he'll like it?" she asked. Her voice was so careful, like she was asking permission to hope. "Of course he will," I said, forcing a smile. "It's handmade. That makes it special." But inside, I knew better. Gage didn't value effort. He valued what glittered, what showed off. The Crane house looked the same as always. Too bright, too loud, too full of people pretending everything was fine. The driveway was packed with cars. Laughter spilled out from the living room before I even reached the door. Inside, the air was thick with cologne, perfume, and denial. My mother, Marlene, appeared first, wrapped in sequins and sweet talk. "Larissa, you made it," she trilled, kissing the air near my cheek. "You look so professional. Still working too much?" "Someone has to," I said, hanging up my coat. She laughed, a light, empty sound. "Oh, always so serious. Tonight's about your brother, okay? Let's not bring the office into this." My father, Clyde, was in his usual chair, nursing a whiskey, the muted glow of a football game flickering in his glasses. He looked up, nodded. "Let's keep things calm tonight," he said, which in Crane language meant "don't embarrass your mother." And then Gage, 33, freshly divorced, freshly bankrupt, freshly forgiven, strode in like a man who'd conquered the world. He wrapped me in a cologne-soaked hug. "My favorite sister." "I'm your only sister," I replied. He grinned, flashing the kind of smile that once fooled bankers and girlfriends alike. "Exactly." Kendall stood behind me, holding her box, eyes wide but determined. She'd practiced giving it to him all morning in front of the mirror. "Go ahead," I whispered. "Now's your chance." She approached him shyly, the room suddenly quieter. "Happy birthday, Uncle Gage," she said, holding out the gift. "I made this for you." He took it, turned it in his hands, pretending to admire it. "You made this?" "Yes," she said. "It's for your keys, or—" He laughed, cutting her off. "That's cute." A few people chuckled. He smirked. "What's it made of, firewood? Guess you take after your mom. Always practical." The laughter that followed wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough to cut. Clyde snorted. Marlene smiled, shaking her head like it was all harmless fun. "Oh, Gage," she said between laughs. "You're terrible." But she didn't stop him. Kendall's shoulders dropped. She looked at me, eyes glassy. I wanted to step in, to shield her. But I'd been trained all my life to stay polite, to not make scenes, to be the adult. And in that moment, I realized what a lie that was. "Gage," I said quietly. "Say thank you." He looked at me, half amused. "What?" "She made it for you," I said, steady. "Say thank you." He chuckled. "Relax, Larissa. It's a joke. Don't make it weird." And then he tossed the box back onto the table. It landed hard. The lid popped open, the hinge snapping clean off. The sound echoed through the room, A tiny crack, but it split something far bigger. Kendall stared at the broken box. Her lip trembled. She didn't cry, she just froze, like she was learning something she shouldn't have to learn, that sometimes love is cruel, and no one stops it. I stepped forward, put my hand on her shoulder. "It's okay, sweetheart. We're leaving." Gage smirked. "Come on, don't be dramatic." I turned to him. "You just made a mistake that ends today." The room went silent. Even the music seemed to lower itself, sensing the shift. Marlene's face tightened. "Larissa, please, it's just a party." "No," I said, my voice calm, almost steady. "It's just enough." I took Kendall's hand and we walked out. Outside, the air was cool and wet, the pavement shining from the rain. My heart pounded, but not from fear, from finality. In the car, Kendall was quiet. Halfway home, she whispered, "Why did they laugh?" I gripped the steering wheel. "Because some people laugh when they don't know how to love right," I said softly. She looked down at the broken box in her lap. "I just wanted him to like it." "I know," I said. "But you did nothing wrong. What you made was beautiful." When I tucked her into bed later, she asked, "Are we still family?" Her question sliced through me. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "We're our own family, you and me. That's enough." After she fell asleep, I sat alone in the hallway. The house was still, but my mind replayed the sound of that hinge breaking. I saw Gage's smirk, my parents' laughter, the way Kendall looked at me, waiting for protection I'd been too afraid to give for years. 8 years. That's how long I'd been holding this family together, financially, emotionally, pretending family helps family meant something. I paid their debts, fixed their messes, absorbed their cruelty. I told myself it was love, but love without respect isn't love, it's servitude. I walked into the bathroom and looked at my reflection. My makeup had smudged, my eyes were red, but there was something new there, resolve. "No more," I whispered. "No more apologies, no more buying their affection, no more saving people who enjoyed watching me drown." That night, under the harsh bathroom light, I let the old version of me die quietly, the daughter who always made peace, the sister who always paid, the woman who kept hoping they'd change. When I turned off the light, the house felt different, lighter, quieter. Maybe that's what freedom sounds like. The silence after you finally stop trying to earn what should have been given. And as I stood there in the dark, one thought settled deep inside me. They didn't lose a daughter that night. I finally stopped losing myself. 6 years earlier, before the box, before the broken laughter, I was still the sister who believed family helps family. That sentence had been my compass, my curse. It was right after my divorce. I'd just moved back into my apartment with Kendall. Barely a mattress on the floor, boxes stacked like walls around us. I was exhausted, but free, or so I thought, until Gage showed up with a grin and a folder full of dreams. He came bearing coffee and a pitch deck. "Larissa," he said, spreading the papers on my kitchen table. "This is going to change everything. Handmade ceramic art. Local, sustainable, profitable. I've already got a lease in Tucson." I looked at the numbers, half realistic, half fantasy, and smiled because that's what I did best. Believe in him even when I shouldn't. He leaned back, confidence oozing. "I just need a little help to get started. A short-term loan, $70,000. "70?" I repeated. The number thudded in my ears like a warning bell. He shrugged. "Collateral?" "Sure. You can hold the BMW until I pay it off. Family helps family, right?" That line, those 3 words, landed like scripture. My parents had said it my whole life whenever they needed something. Family helps family. It always sounded noble. It always cost me something. I remember staring at the paperwork, the ink bleeding slightly where my pen shook. I signed anyway. Gage grinned, kissed my cheek, called me the best sister ever. I told myself it was an investment in his future, but what it really was a down payment on disappointment. That night, I canceled a vacation I'd been planning for Kendall's 13th birthday. She'd wanted to see the ocean. I told her maybe next year. She smiled and said it was okay, but I caught her later, looking at a travel brochure under her pillow. I told myself sacrifices were temporary. That love meant patience. That one day we'd all be proud of each other. The first year, Gage sent payments like clockwork. Every month, a small deposit labeled, "Thank you, sis." I'd smile each time I saw it. Proof he meant well. Proof I wasn't a fool. But by the second year, the deposit stopped. At first, I thought it was a mistake. A banking delay, a busy month. Then his phone calls went unanswered, texts unread. Finally, I drove the 6 hours to Tucson. The store was empty. Dust on the shelves, a faded, closed sign hanging crooked on the door. Through the glass, I could still see the outlines of where the shelves used to be. The only thing left behind was a half-broken ceramic vase, the word family carved into it like mockery. When I called him, he answered on the fourth ring. "Oh, hey, Larissa," he said, like I was a neighbor dropping by for sugar. "Yeah, we hit a snag. Supply chain issues. I'll pay you back soon." "You vanished for months." "I told you, things got complicated." "You took $70,000 from me," I said, voice trembling. "That's not complicated, that's theft." He sighed dramatically. "God, you sound like Dad. You think I don't feel bad? I just need time." I could almost hear him smiling through the phone. "I trusted you," I said. "And you still can," he replied. "Because family helps family." I drove home in silence, my chest tight, my mind replaying those words over and over. Family helps family. The same mantra my mother would echo later that night when I told her what happened. "Oh, Larissa, don't be so hard on him," she said. "He's just under pressure. You know Gage, he's got potential." "Potential doesn't pay bills," I said. "Don't say that," she snapped. "You're his sister. He needs your support." That was when I realized they didn't want a daughter who stood up for herself. They wanted a sponsor. For months, I worked overtime, long nights hunched over my laptop, living on coffee and deadlines, just to patch the hole his promises had left. Every time I felt exhausted, I pictured Kendall's smile fading the day we canceled that trip. I told myself it would be worth it if the family stayed together. But together was a lie. Together meant me holding everyone else up while they kicked my hands loose. Sometimes I'd scroll through Gage's Instagram. He was smiling in bars, traveling, posting motivational quotes about resilience. In one photo, he stood next to the BMW I technically owned, captioned, "Work hard, play harder." I wanted to comment. I didn't. Instead, I closed my phone and whispered to no one, "You're financing your own heartbreak." That was what Casey, my coworker and friend, told me the next morning at the office. She was a single mom too, the kind who saw truth before it hurt you. "You're not helping your family, Larissa," she said gently. "You're funding their excuses." Her words hit harder than I wanted to admit. That night, I looked at Kendall sleeping beside her handmade dream catcher, the one she said kept nightmares out. I realized mine all wore familiar faces. For years, I'd been teaching my daughter to be kind, to forgive. But in my silence, I was also teaching her something else, that love meant letting people hurt you twice. I sat at the edge of her bed and whispered, "It ends with me." That night, I finally understood the difference between helping and enabling. One builds bridges, the other builds cages. And I'd been the one welding the bars. By the second year, the silence became louder than his promises. No calls, no payments, No explanations, just absence. $70,000 had dissolved into thin air, and with it, what little trust I still had left in my family. At first, I told myself he was just struggling. Maybe the business had hit a rough patch. Maybe he was ashamed. Maybe I was still the fool who believed shame could exist in someone who had never truly said sorry. When the 4th month passed without a single word, I got in my car and drove 6 hours to Tucson. I didn't call ahead. I wanted the truth, not a performance. The drive was long and flat, the desert stretching endlessly on both sides. Empty, merciless, honest. By the time I reached the address on the business registration papers, my throat felt raw from silence. The shop sat in a forgotten strip mall, sand-dusted windows, the name Crane Ceramics painted in fading blue. The door was locked. Through the glass, I could see dust coating the shelves, abandoned boxes, a cracked mug sitting on the counter like a relic of failure. I knocked anyway. Nothing. I circled to the back, where a man was smoking near the dumpster. "You know what happened to the guy who owned this place?" I asked. He blew out smoke, squinting. "Packed up months ago. Left in the middle of the night. Didn't even take the sign down." The world tilted slightly. For a second, I thought I might faint. Not from shock, but from how unsurprising it was. I called Gage from the parking lot. It rang 6 times before he answered. "Hey sis," he said, too casually. "What's up?" "What's up?" I repeated. "I'm standing outside your shop, Gage. It's empty." He paused, then sighed. "Yeah, we had some issues. Supply chain, landlord problems. Just bad luck all around." "Bad luck?" My voice shook. "You owe me $70,000. "Larissa, don't start," he said, the friendliness in his tone curdling into annoyance. "I'm trying to fix things. You vanished for months. I needed space," he snapped. "God, you always act like my probation officer." My hand trembled around the phone. "You promised you'd pay me back." "And I will," he said smoothly. "You just have to trust me. Family helps family, remember?" Those 3 words again. They used to sound sacred. Now they sounded like a weapon. When I got home that night, Kendall was waiting at the kitchen table doing homework. "You look tired," she said. "I'm fine," I lied. "Just work stuff." But even as I said it, I felt something break inside. It wasn't anger. It was clarity. The next weekend, I drove to my parents' house. I wanted them to know, to see who they were protecting. I wanted to believe they'd stand by me for once. But when I told them, Marlene's face tightened. "You shouldn't have loaned him that much," she said. "He said he'd pay me back," I replied. "And he will," she insisted. "He's just going through a hard time." "Mom, he's lying to you," she exhaled dramatically. "Larissa, not everything's black and white. He's your brother." My father chimed in from behind his newspaper. "He just needs time. Don't ruin the relationship over money." I laughed, sharp, humorless. "You mean don't ruin his comfort?" The room went cold. Marlene stared at me like I'd just cursed at the family altar. "We raised you to care about your family," she said quietly. "No," I said, standing. "You raised me to clean up after them." On the drive home, I kept thinking about how easy it was for them to dismiss my pain. They didn't see me as a daughter anymore. I was their insurance policy, their ATM with a conscience. That week, I started keeping 2 versions of my life. The one everyone saw, calm, stable, dependable, and the one underneath, where I was quietly unraveling. There were nights I worked past midnight, staring at lines of code until my vision blurred. Empty coffee cups stacked like proof of devotion, bills on the counter, my phone lighting up with Kendall's missed calls because she'd fallen asleep waiting for me to come home. And then there were the other nights, when I scrolled through social media and saw Gage laughing in bars, posing with his new girlfriend, the BMW parked behind them like a trophy. One post said, "When life knocks you down, rebuild harder. Rebuild harder. With my money." Sometimes I'd hover over the comment button, my fingers itching to type the truth. But I didn't. Because I knew no one would believe it. Gage was the charming one. I was the difficult sister. The serious one. The one who never lets things go. Still, I couldn't stop watching. Each picture was another withdrawal from my hope, my dignity, my belief that decency could be repaid in kind. Then, one night at work, my coworker Casey slid a cup of coffee across my desk. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm fine," I said automatically. "You've been saying that for 6 months," she said gently. "You're not fine." I tried to laugh, but it cracked halfway out. "It's family. It's complicated." "No," she said. "It's not. You're not helping your family, Larissa. You're financing your own heartbreak." Her words sank in slowly, like cold water finding every crack. That night, when I got home, Kendall was asleep on the couch, the TV still on. She'd fallen asleep waiting for me again. Her math homework lay open beside her, the margins filled with tiny doodles, flowers, stars, the word home written over and over. I sat beside her and brushed her hair back. And for the first time, I saw how much of my exhaustion had spilled into her life, how my silence had been teaching her that love meant endurance, not respect. I whispered, "I'm sorry, baby. This ends with me." I didn't know yet what that meant or how far. I'd have to go to make it real. But that night, under the hum of the TV and the sound of rain beginning again outside, I made myself a promise. No more being the family accountant. No more cleaning the blood from their mistakes. No more loans. No more lies. Just truth. Even if it burned everything else down. For a long time, I thought love meant sacrifice. That's what I saw growing up. My mother stretching herself thin for everyone but herself. My father demanding quiet instead of help. And me, learning that the easiest way to be loved was to give until it hurt. After Tucson, the math of our family became impossible to ignore. Gage took. My parents excused. And I kept paying the interest on everyone's comfort. Rent for my parents' house when Dad forgot to send the check. Groceries for Mom when she said her credit card got declined. Little transfers that added up to silence. Every month, I told myself it was temporary. Every month, I believed the lie a little less. The breaking point came quietly on a Tuesday night. I was finishing code revisions at my kitchen table when my phone buzzed. Mom calling. I almost didn't answer, but old habits die slowly. "Larissa, honey," Marlene began, her tone sweet and strategic. "Gage is in a little trouble. He had some bills pile up with the store closure. Your father and I are helping, but—" "No," I said. There was a pause. "Excuse me?" I said no. "I've already helped enough." She sighed dramatically. "You've changed. You used to care about this family." "I still care," I said. "Just not enough to destroy myself over it." The silence that followed was thick and brittle. When she finally spoke, her voice was cold. "You sound just like your father's sister." She walked away from us too. And look where she ended up. Alone. "Maybe that's not the tragedy you think it is," I said and hung up. I sat there for a long time afterward, staring at the phone, waiting for guilt to crawl up my throat. But it didn't. Instead, there was something new, something that felt dangerously close to peace. Still, peace doesn't come cheap. A week later, Gage called himself. He sounded drunk, his words slurring between charm and accusation. "You're really gonna hang me out to dry?" he said. "I'm not hanging you. I replied. I'm just not saving you anymore. He laughed bitterly. Wow. All those times you said family mattered. What a joke. You're right, I said quietly. It was. After that call, I went to the kitchen, grabbed my laptop, and opened my bank account. One by one, I turned off every automatic payment that had my parents' name on it: electricity, insurance, rent. The sound of each click felt like cutting a thread that had been strangling me. The next morning, I woke up early to the kind of silence that felt different. Lighter. More honest. The air in the apartment didn't taste like resentment anymore. Kendall noticed it too. Mom, she said over breakfast, you look taller. I laughed. I think that's what happens when you stop carrying people who refuse to walk. But it wasn't until a few days later that I understood what true clarity looked like. It was lunch hour at work, and I was sitting outside with Casey, my coworker, the one who never sugarcoated. She bit into her sandwich, squinting at me. So, did you finally cut them off? She asked. Yeah, I said. Yesterday. She grinned. About time. I thought it would feel awful, I admitted. But it doesn't. Because it's not cruelty, she said. It's correction. Her words hit something deep. Correction. Not revenge, not punishment, just balance restored. That night, I came home early for once. Kendall was sprawled on the living room floor, working on a new woodworking project, a little birdhouse. Sawdust sparkled in the afternoon light. Can you help me hold this, Mom? She asked. I crouched beside her, pressing my finger against the joint she was gluing. You're really good at this, I said. She shrugged, smiling. I like making things that last. That line stayed with me. Things that last. Later, when she fell asleep, I sat in the quiet again, scrolling through old messages from Gage. Apologies, excuses, promises that looked like love but were just debt written in softer handwriting. I deleted every single one. Then I opened a note on my phone and typed 3 words: love isn't debt. It felt almost sacred. The next morning, the universe decided to test my newfound peace. My father showed up unannounced at my office. I saw him through the glass door. Creased khakis, that familiar disappointed look, the one he'd worn since I was a teenager. Larissa, he said, stepping inside, we need to talk. Dad, this isn't a good time. It never is, he interrupted. Your mother's worried sick. You've cut us off. And Gage, well, he's falling apart. You're his sister. I'm not his sponsor, I said. He frowned. He's family. So am I said. Why doesn't that ever count? For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, something almost human. Then he sighed and said, You always were the stubborn one. I learned it from you, I said, and walked him to the door. When I got home that night, the apartment smelled like dinner. Garlic, butter, life. Kendall had set the table. I made spaghetti, she announced proudly. You said we needed to celebrate more. We ate quietly, the two of us, the city glowing outside our window. Somewhere between bites, I realized I didn't miss the noise of my old family at all. After dinner, Kendall showed me her finished birdhouse. It's not perfect, she said. I smiled. Neither are we, but we're getting stronger where we cracked. That night, lying in bed, I thought about Casey's words again. Correction, not cruelty. Setting boundaries wasn't about revenge. It was about redefining what love meant in a family that had twisted the word until it hurt. And for the first time, I didn't feel like the selfish one for pulling away. I felt like the survivor. Because love that costs. Your peace isn't love, it's debt. And I was finally learning how to stop paying. It didn't happen all at once. The end of something never does. It begins with small fractures that spread quietly until one day, the whole thing collapses under its own weight. For me, it happened back where it all began. At another family gathering. Gage's birthday party, they called it. But it felt less like a celebration and more like déjà vu wrapped in cheap champagne. I wasn't planning to go, but Marlene had called for days, leaving voicemails layered with guilt. He's still your brother, Larissa. Don't make this about money. Be the bigger person. I told myself I'd go for one reason only, to make sure they saw who I'd become. Not their safety net. Not their scapegoat. Just a woman done apologizing. When Kendall and I walked into that house, everything looked the same. Same music, same fake laughter, same smell of liquor and resentment. Even the decorations were identical. The same banner, just a different year. I could almost laugh at the symmetry of it all. Kendall was taller now, quieter. She'd spent the drive tracing her finger along the edge of a book she'd brought, like she needed something steady to hold. I squeezed her hand. You okay? I just don't want him to ruin my birthday gift this time, she said softly. The words hit me like a knife. I hadn't realized she remembered it that vividly. Inside, Gage stood at the center of attention, beer in hand, spinning another story about how he was on the verge of a comeback. My parents listened, hanging on every word. His failure had become their favorite fiction. They'd rather believe he was misunderstood than admit he was selfish. When he saw me, he grinned. Look who decided to show up, the Ice Queen herself. I smiled thinly. Just here for the cake. We hadn't spoken since the confrontation at my office months ago. The air between us hummed with unfinished sentences. Kendall stayed close, her shoulders tense. She had made another small box, this one for herself, carved from cedar wood. She didn't offer it to him. She didn't even look at him. The night blurred in a haze of laughter, alcohol, and denial. Gage grew louder with every drink. My mother beamed at him, proud of his empty stories. My father pretended not to see the truth sitting right beside him. And then, it happened again. Kendall accidentally dropped her napkin near Gage's chair. When she bent down to pick it up, he muttered just loud enough for me to hear. Guess she takes after her mom. Always cleaning up other people's messes. The room laughed. My body went still. For years, I had endured the kind of humiliation that dressed itself as humor. But hearing him drag my daughter into it, that was the moment something inside me snapped clean in half. I stood. That's enough. The laughter stuttered. Gage leaned back, smirking. Relax, sis, it's a joke. No, I said, it's a pattern. He blinked, confused. My voice was steady now, cold enough to make him sober. I reached for Kendall's hand, pulled her close. It's okay, sweetheart, I whispered, my voice trembling with quiet rage. Mom's got you. Then louder. I will never let this happen again. The room was silent. Only the clinking of ice in someone's glass filled the space. Gage's smirk twitched. You're overreacting. Don't be so dramatic. I met his eyes. You just made a mistake that ends today. Then I took out my phone, scrolled to our family group chat, and typed slowly, my fingers shaking but firm. You're on your own. Everything stops today. Attached were photos, the BMW title, the rent receipts, every proof of the debt they had wrapped around my neck for years. I hit send. The little delivered checkmark glowed like the first crack of lightning before a storm. Gage laughed, thinking it was a bluff. Oh, come on, you wouldn't... Outside, a horn blared. A tow truck idled at the curb, its yellow lights flashing through the window. He turned pale. You called them? I didn't answer. The room erupted. Marlene shouting my name, Clyde demanding an explanation. But I didn't hear them. My heart was pounding too loudly. For the first time, it wasn't fear. It was freedom. Gage ran outside, yelling at the driver, begging, swearing. The sight of his precious BMW being pulled onto that truck was almost biblical. His voice cracked as he shouted my name. Larissa, please don't do this. I stepped onto the porch, Kendall standing behind me. I already did, I said. The truck pulled away, taillights glowing red in the dark. Gage dropped to his knees in the driveway, cursing, his voice hoarse. Inside the house, my mother was crying, not for me, but for him. You've gone too far, she screamed. No, I said. I've gone far enough. I took Kendall's hand and walked past them, out into the night air. In the car, my hands were still shaking. I didn't start the engine right away. The silence between us was heavy but peaceful. Mom? Kendall said softly. Yeah? You're not scared anymore. I looked at her, a small smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. No, I'm not. We drove home in silence, the city lights passing like slow-moving stars. When we got there, I made us tea. We sat in the kitchen, the only sound the soft tapping of rain against the window. Kendall leaned her head on my shoulder. Does this mean we don't have to see them again? I hesitated. Maybe not for a while, but someday we'll have to decide what forgiveness looks like. Do we have to forgive? Not yet, I said. First, we heal. For the first time in years, breakfast the next morning felt different. We ate pancakes while sunlight filled the kitchen. No phone calls, no demands, no guilt clawing at the edges of the day. Just quiet. That's what freedom really is. Not fireworks, not revenge, but silence that finally feels safe. I looked at Kendall, laughing over her syrup-stained plate, and I realized something. The moment I stopped being their provider, I became her protector. And that was the only title I ever wanted. The morning after the tow truck came, I woke to a silence that felt almost foreign. No buzzing phone, no missed calls, no guilt waiting for me in my inbox. The quiet pressed against the walls, unfamiliar but clean. Like the house itself was exhaling after years of holding its breath. Kendall was already awake, sitting by the window with her sketchbook balanced on her knees. Her hair was messy, a streak of sunlight painting her face gold. You're up early, I said, reaching for the coffee pot. She smiled faintly. It's quiet. Too quiet? She shook her head. I like it. It hit me then, that this was the first morning of her childhood untouched by family chaos. After breakfast, I sat down with my laptop and began cutting the last strings that tied me to them. There was no anger, no shaking, just clarity. I logged into my accounts and canceled every automatic payment connected to my parents. Rent, insurance, credit cards. Each confirmation click sounded like the snap of a thread I'd been tangled in my whole life. Then I filed a report on Gage's debt, officially transferring the BMW's title back to my name. It felt strange, reclaiming something that had once symbolized obligation. Now it meant something else entirely: control. By noon, my phone began ringing. Mom's voice came first, sharp and trembling. Larissa, how could you do this? You've humiliated your own brother. Everyone saw. You've shamed us all. Then Dad, his tone quieter but heavier. You didn't have to make it public. You could have handled this privately. And finally, Gage. His voice cracked with fury. You think this makes you better than us? You've destroyed my business, Larissa. You're a monster. I listened to each message once, then deleted them. Not to forget, but to release. I'd spent too long carrying their noise inside me. I didn't owe them space anymore. That night, I poured a glass of wine and sat on the balcony. The city hummed below, neon lights blinking like restless thoughts. I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't even relieved. What I felt was simpler, like I'd finally stopped bleeding. My phone buzzed again, a video notification. Someone had filmed the repossession. There was Gage, shouting at the tow truck driver, red-faced, desperate, his voice cracking as the car rolled away. The caption read, "Local business owner loses it during repossession." It already had thousands of views. I watched it once, then closed it. For years, I'd been the one shielding him from embarrassment, covering his lies, carrying his shame like it was my duty. Now, the truth was doing the work for me. The next morning, an envelope arrived, a confirmation letter from the repo company. Asset reclaimed, title transferred. I held it in my hands, realizing this wasn't just about a car. It was proof that I could draw a line and hold it. That weekend, Kendall and I went to our favorite diner. It had been months since we'd sat in that booth, the one by the window where the light always made her hair glow. She ordered pancakes, like always, and smiled at me. "So, are we free now?" "Almost," I said. "Freedom takes practice." She nodded, thinking, "You look different." "How so?" "Like you're not scared anymore." Her words lingered with me all day. Because she was right. Fear had been the quiet language of my family, spoken in sighs, obligations, and maybe next times. But I was done speaking it. The next day, Gage showed up at my office. I saw him through the glass, disheveled, eyes bloodshot, jaw tight. My stomach tightened, but my pulse stayed steady. He stormed in. "You think you can just erase me?" "I didn't erase you," I said calmly. "You did that yourself." "You took everything," he yelled. "I took back what was mine." He stepped closer, too close, his breath hot with anger. "You're my sister." "And you're trespassing," I said evenly, nodding toward security. When they escorted him out, he turned and spat. "You'll regret this." Maybe once, I would've. But as the doors closed behind him, I realized something simple and powerful. I wasn't scared anymore. That night, I filed a restraining order. The police officer asked if I was sure. I said, "Completely." When I got home, Kendall was sitting on the couch, waiting. "Did he come to your work?" she asked quietly. "Yes." "Are we okay?" "We will be," I said. "I'm making sure of it." The next morning, as I signed the papers, she watched me from across the kitchen. "Is that really necessary?" "Yes," I said. "It's what safety looks like." Days passed. The repo video went viral again. My parents were furious, leaving long, rambling voicemails about family honor and forgiveness. I didn't reply. For once, I didn't even feel the urge to. One night, as Kendall and I ate dinner, she said, "Mom, you seem lighter." I smiled. I think I finally put something down. "What?" "The idea that I have to keep everyone else standing." After she went to bed, I stood at the kitchen window, staring out at our small garden. Messy, uneven, but growing anyway. We'd planted it last spring, and I'd nearly given up when the first frost came. But the plants had survived. Stronger for it. That's what this felt like. Not victory. Survival. Growth. For years, I thought control meant managing everyone else's chaos. Now I understood. Control meant peace. The kind you build, protect, and refuse to apologize for. When I turned off the lights, the house stayed quiet. No ringing phone, no guilt, no fear. Just the steady sound of Kendall's laughter drifting faintly from her room. And I thought, maybe this is what freedom really sounds like. Not the roar of rebellion, but the whisper of a home that finally feels safe. I used to think setting boundaries would make me cruel. That saying no to family was a betrayal. But I've learned, when people feed on your kindness, every boundary feels like violence to them. For a few weeks after the repo, everything was calm. Too calm. No calls, no visits, no messages. It felt like we were finally invisible to them. And invisibility, I was learning, was a kind of safety. Then one night, the phone rang at 1:17 a.m. I didn't answer. But when the voicemail alert blinked, something in my chest told me to check. It was Gage. His voice was slurred, broken, half drunk. "You think you can just cut us off, Larissa? You think you're free? You're nothing without us." My stomach turned cold. He sounded angrier than I'd ever heard him. I locked the doors, checked the windows, and stood in the hallway listening to the faint hum of the fridge until my heart slowed. The next morning, I tried to brush it off. Maybe he was just drunk. Maybe he'd sleep it off and forget. But deep down, I knew better. People like Gage don't forget rejection. They turn it into fuel. 2 nights later, it happened. I was in bed, half asleep, when a pounding rattled the front door. "Larissa, open up!" Kendall shot upright. "Mom?" I grabbed my phone, heart racing. "Stay here," I whispered, moving toward the hall. Another bang, louder this time. "You think you can take my car? You think you can ruin my life?" It was him. My hands shook as I dialed 911. "My brother's outside," I whispered. "He's drunk. He's threatening us." The dispatcher's calm voice guided me through every step. "Stay inside. Lock the doors. Wait for officers." But as Gage shouted, the calm dissolved into instinct. I pulled Kendall into my closet. She clung to me, trembling, her breath hot against my neck. We sat there, listening to the chaos outside, the thud of his fists against the door, his voice slurring my name like a curse. Then came silence. Heavy, terrifying. A moment later, red and blue lights splashed across the windows. When the knock came again, this time firm, professional, I nearly collapsed with relief. The officers led Gage away in handcuffs. He screamed the whole time. "You'll regret this, Larissa, you'll see." Kendall didn't say a word. She just watched through the window, her small hands gripping the curtain. When they drove him away, she turned to me and asked, "Is he going to come back?" "I won't let him," I said. The next morning, I went to the courthouse. My hands still shook as I signed the paperwork for a restraining order. It felt surreal, seeing his name on a legal document under the words "prohibited contact," like finally writing an ending to a story that had dragged on too long. The officer who helped me looked at me gently. "You'd be surprised how many people don't take this step," she said. "I waited too long," I admitted. She nodded. "Then you've waited just enough." When I got home, Kendall was at the table drawing again. Only this time, it wasn't a birdhouse or a gift. It was a shield. "It's for you," she said, sliding the paper toward me. "For me?" She smiled. "So you don't have to protect everyone alone anymore." That night, we both slept in her room. I kept the phone by my side, though I didn't expect it to ring. The quiet was thick but peaceful, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel small in my own house. I felt strong. Days turned into weeks. The restraining order held. Gage's calls stopped. Mom tried once to talk to me. "He's your brother, Larissa. He's sick. You can't just abandon him." "I didn't abandon him," I said. "I stopped enabling him." She hung up. I thought that would be the hardest part, the rejection. But instead, it was freeing. Because the moment you realize that peace costs other people their control, you stop feeling guilty for buying it. Kendall started laughing more. The dark circles under her eyes faded. I caught her one morning, humming while she packed her lunch. That tiny sound, normal, ordinary, felt like victory. One evening, I came home to find her building something in the garage. "Need help?" I asked. She grinned. "No, I just want to build something strong enough not to break." I watched her hammer a joint in place, steady, precise. Each strike echoed through the quiet house, a rhythm of healing. That night, as she fell asleep, I sat by her bed and thought about how much had changed. My life had been ruled by fear, but now that fear had transformed into something sharper. Boundaries made of steel. And the thing about steel is, it's not born that way. It's forged, heated, hammered. I'd been through the fire long enough to know I wasn't fragile anymore. The next morning, I stood at the mirror, tying my hair, and for the first time, I liked the woman looking back. Not because she was unscarred, but because she finally wore her scars like armor. Kendall joined me, holding her drawing, the shield she'd made. "You should hang this somewhere," she said. "Where?" "Someplace you'll see it every day." I pinned it to the fridge. The word she'd written across it in bold pencil lines made my throat tighten. Safe. I ran my hand over the word, breathing in the quiet of our little home. The world hadn't gotten easier, but we had. And that, I realized, was the real revenge, not watching them fall, but knowing we had learned to stand without them. For weeks after the restraining order, the world stayed eerily calm. Too calm. No calls, no letters, not even a rumor from the Crane family network that usually thrived on gossip. But I knew better than to trust the quiet. In my family, peace was never permanent. It was the pause before someone decided they were the victim again. It happened on a Thursday morning. I was halfway through a code review at work when my coworker Casey appeared in the doorway, her face pale. "Larissa," she whispered, "you need to see this." Outside the office windows, a small crowd had gathered by the front gate, and standing in the middle of them, my parents, Clyde and Marlene Crane, my mother holding a cardboard sign painted in red, "Ungrateful daughter, Frus, broken family." My father stood beside her, streaming live on Facebook, his phone held high, the caption blazing, "Our daughter cut us off and destroyed her brother's future." For a moment the world blurred. The murmurs of my co-workers, the flashing cameras, the comments scrolling on a live feed, all of it became distant noise. Casey's hand touched my arm. "Do you want me to call security?" I shook my head, though my voice felt stuck somewhere between disbelief and heartbreak. "No, I'll handle it." I stepped outside. The Arizona sun was sharp, unforgiving. Mom saw me first. "There she is," she cried, waving her sign higher. "Everyone, this is the daughter who abandoned her family." The onlookers turned, phones lifted. I could hear whispers, some pitying, some eager for a spectacle. My father's expression was worse than anger. It was disappointment worn like a mask. "Larissa," he said into the camera, "we just want you to admit you went too far, that you regret what you did." I took a breath, steady, deliberate. "What I did," I said, "was save myself." Gasps. A few muffled laughs from strangers. Mom's eyes widened. "You're humiliating us." I met her gaze. "You're doing that all by yourself." Then I turned and walked back inside. My legs felt like stone, but I didn't run. Not this time. Security escorted them off the property minutes later, but the video was already online. Within hours, it spread across local groups. Neighbors, coworkers, even old classmates commenting their opinions like they knew the story. That night, I sat in bed scrolling through the chaos. Some comments were cruel. "She must be heartless." Some were kind. "Good for her. Boundaries matter." Most were noise. Kendall sat beside me, watching. "Does it bother you?" she asked. "It used to," I said honestly. "But now, I think it just proves I was right to walk away." She nodded. "They don't sound like family." "No," I said. "They sound like people who lost their power." 2 days later, HR called me into a meeting. They were professional, sympathetic. "We understand this is personal," my manager said gently. "We just need to make sure you're safe." I appreciated it more than they knew, because for once, someone didn't tell me to make peace. They told me to protect it. After work, I drove home in silence. The desert sun was melting into pink and orange streaks, the kind of sunset that used to make me feel small. But now it felt different. Now it felt like something ending. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, looking through my finances, checking for any leftover links to them. Old accounts, family insurance plans, little threads I hadn't cut yet, and I severed every one. When I was done, I stared at the total on my screen, savings that were finally mine, not shared, not borrowed, not owed. It didn't feel like wealth. It felt like dignity. The next week, I heard from a friend in Scottsdale that my parents had lost the house. Foreclosure. They'd moved into a small roadside motel with Gage, who was now delivering food for Uber Eats. The irony burned quietly in my chest, because even now part of me wanted to fix it. But I didn't. Kendall found me sitting on the couch that night, staring at nothing. "You okay?" she asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "It feels wrong to feel free when there's suffering." She thought for a second, then said, "Maybe that's how you know you're not like them." I looked at her, and something in me softened. My daughter wasn't becoming me. She was becoming better. A few days later, an email arrived. No subject line, just a single sentence. "You'll regret what you've done." It came from an untraceable address, but I didn't need to ask who sent it. I stared at it for a long time before pressing delete. Not everything deserves an answer. That evening, I took Kendall to the park. We sat on a bench watching the sunset, the air cool and quiet. She leaned her head on my shoulder. "Do you ever wish things had been different?" she asked. "Sometimes," I said. "But if they had, we might never have learned how strong we could be." She smiled, and for a moment, I caught a glimpse of peace reflected in her eyes, the kind I'd spent years chasing. Later that night, before bed, I stood at the mirror brushing my hair. I looked older, yes, but lighter. The kind of woman who'd stopped trying to be liked and started trying to be whole. The phone buzzed once more, a final missed call from a familiar number. I stared at it, the name glowing on the screen. Mom, then hit block. And just like that, the silence returned. This time, it didn't feel empty. It felt earned. Because public shame fades, but private peace? That stays. A year passed. The kind of year that doesn't feel like time but like distance. Measured not in months, but in how far you've walked from the people who used to own your silence. Kendall and I had moved to Flagstaff by then. A smaller city. Quieter. The kind of place where the mountains cradle you instead of judging you. I rented a little house with creaky floors and wildflowers growing through the fence. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. Every morning, I woke to the smell of pine instead of stress. I'd drink coffee on the porch while Kendall waited for her school bus, her laughter echoing across the street. Her shoulders didn't hunch anymore when someone said, "family." Life was simple, peaceful. But peace is never permanent. It's a muscle you have to keep strengthening. One Saturday afternoon, I came home from the grocery store to find an envelope wedged under the door. No return address, but the handwriting was familiar. That slanted, impatient scrawl. I didn't need to open it to know it was from Gage. I should have thrown it away. I didn't. Inside was a letter, 4 pages long. The first words punched the air from my lungs. "Larissa, I'm not asking for forgiveness, just help." He wrote about how everything had fallen apart. His business, his car, his pride. He said Dad's health had gotten worse, that a diabetic infection might cost him his leg if he didn't get surgery soon. "He won't admit it," Gage wrote, "but Mom cries every night. We need help, Larissa, please, just one more time." My hands trembled as I read it. Not because of pity, but because I could still hear the old version of myself whispering, "Maybe this time it'll be different." I put the letter down and stared at it for a long time. The clock ticked loudly in the quiet room. Part of me wanted to pick up the phone. I imagined Mom's voice cracking on the other end, the way she used to sound when I scraped my knee as a child. I imagined Dad in a hospital bed, frail, human, unshaven. And then I imagined Gage, manipulative, smooth, always 2 steps ahead of guilt. I knew what this was. Not a plea. A test. That night, Kendall found me at the table, staring at the letter. "What's that?" she asked. "Your uncle wrote to me," I said. Her brow furrowed. "What does he want?" "To borrow more," I said softly. "But this time, he's calling it help." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Are you going to?" I looked at her, the calm in her eyes, the stability I'd fought so hard to build, and realized what was at stake. "I don't know," I admitted. She picked up the letter, read a few lines, then set it down. "Mom," she said gently, "he's still writing in guilt, not truth." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, the cool mountain air drifting in. The moonlight fell across the little cedar box Kendall had made me years ago, the one Gage had mocked and broken. It still had a small crack down the side, repaired clumsily with glue. I traced that crack with my fingertip, remembering her words when she fixed it. "It's stronger where it broke." By dawn, I knew what I had to do. When Kendall came into the kitchen, I was already dressed for work, the letter folded neatly beside my coffee mug. "You decided," she said. I nodded. I did. I placed the letter into the trash can, pressed it down beneath the old newspapers, and whispered, "No more loans. No more lies." Kendall watched silently, then smiled. Soft, proud, understanding. That evening, as I washed dishes, I thought about my father's leg, about my mother's tears, about Gage's desperation. I wasn't stone. I still felt pain for them. But compassion doesn't mean access. Forgiveness doesn't mean return. And maybe loving someone from a distance is the only way to stop them from hurting you again. A week passed. No calls, no letters, no consequences. The world didn't collapse without my sacrifice. It kept spinning, quietly, peacefully. One evening, while packing dinner, Kendall said, "You know, sometimes I think your strength is the reason I believe people can change." I looked at her, surprised. "You think I changed?" She grinned. "Completely. You stopped trying to fix broken people. You started building new things instead." I couldn't help but laugh. "Like what?" She held up her hands, still flecked with sawdust. "Like me." Her words sat heavy in my chest, the kind of truth that humbles you. Later that night, as I sat by the fire, I thought about the letter again. How easily one piece of paper could pull you back into a past you fought to escape. But I hadn't fallen this time. I'd chosen differently. And that's the real test. When life offers you the same pain again, and you choose not to pick it up. Before bed, I checked my email. A new message from an unknown address. I hesitated, then opened it. A single line read, "You did the right thing." No name, no context. But I smiled anyway. Maybe it was a stranger. Maybe it was no one. Or maybe it was the universe, reminding me that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just whispers enough. I turned off the lights, the house soft in its quiet. For the first time in years, I felt untested, untethered, and wholly my own. Because when the final test came, I didn't fail them. I finally passed myself. It's strange how peace doesn't arrive with fanfare. It slips in quietly, through mornings that don't hurt, through laughter that doesn't feel borrowed, through silence that finally feels safe. A year after the letter, our lives had settled into something I'd never known before. Normalcy. Real, unshakable, ordinary peace. Kendall had grown taller, her hair longer, her laughter louder. She spent most of her weekends in the community woodshop Casey and I helped her join. What started as a hobby had turned into something almost sacred, her way of building strength from splinters. One Saturday, she called me over. "Mom, come see." On the workbench sat a box of cedar wood, polished smooth, its dovetail joints perfectly fitted. She lifted the lid with the same reverence a musician has for their first instrument. Inside, etched in tiny, careful handwriting, were the words, "I made it stronger where it cracked." For a second, I couldn't breathe. That box, the one she had built years ago for Gage, the one he had mocked and thrown aside, had been remade. Not as a gift for someone else, but as a promise to herself. I brushed my thumb over the inscription. "It's beautiful," I said softly. Kendall grinned. "It's not perfect." "That's why it's beautiful," I replied. When she went back to sanding, I stood there for a long time, watching her hands move with precision and patience. There was no fear in them now, only focus, creation. That afternoon, Casey stopped by. She'd become more than a friend. She was family now. The kind that didn't demand anything except honesty. We sat on the porch, drinking iced tea, watching Kendall and her friend paint the box's edges. "She's got your fire," Casey said. "She's got my lessons," I corrected. "And she's building new ones." We both laughed, the kind of laughter that doesn't need to hide pain behind it. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low, I found myself looking through an old photo album I hadn't touched in years. My parents, young and smiling, Gage as a boy, holding a toy car. Me, awkward and hopeful. Once, those pictures would have torn something open in me. Now they just felt distant, like a story I'd read too many times and finally understood. Some wounds never vanish, but they stop bleeding when you stop picking at them. I closed the album, placed it in a drawer, and whispered a quiet thank you to the woman I used to be, the one who stayed long enough to learn, and the one who finally walked away. That night, Kendall joined me on the couch, her head on my shoulder. "You ever think about them?" she asked. "Sometimes," I said, "but not the same way. I used to think about what I lost. Now I think about what I found." "What's that?" she asked sleepily. "Peace," I said. "And you?" We sat there in the quiet, the hum of the refrigerator and the faint chirp of crickets outside blending into the kind of silence that feels like home. The next week, Kendall's woodworking project won an award at her school fair, Best in Craftsmanship. When they called her name, she walked onto the stage with quiet confidence. I clapped until my hands stung. After the ceremony, she handed me the ribbon. "You should have this," she said. I shook my head. "You earned it." She smiled. "You taught me how." That night, as I drove us home through the mountains, the headlights cut through the mist like slow-moving ghosts. The air smelled like pine and rain. Kendall rested her head against the window, humming softly. "Mom?" she murmured. "Yeah?" "I think Grandpa and Uncle Gage might see this one day. The box, I mean." "Maybe," I said. "What do you think they'll say?" I smiled faintly. "Hopefully, nothing at all. Because some stories don't need closure, they just need peace." When we got home, I tucked her in, kissed her forehead, and sat by her bedside for a while. The glow from her lamp cast long, soft shadows across the room. I thought about everything that had brought us here. The laughter, the betrayal, the nights I thought I wouldn't make it through. And I realized something simple, something I wish I'd known years ago. Forgiveness isn't a gift for the people who hurt you. It's permission for yourself to stop carrying them. The next morning, the world was calm. I brewed coffee, stepped outside, and watched the sunrise spill over the mountains. The light touched everything, every scar, every broken place, and somehow made it beautiful. I thought about the word family. For so long, it meant pain, obligation, a debt I could never repay. Now it meant something smaller, quieter. Two people who chose each other every day. Before heading to work, I passed by Kendall's new box sitting on the counter. I traced my finger along the carved words again. I made it stronger where it cracked. And I smiled. Because that wasn't just her story. It was ours. I could still hear my parents' old accusations sometimes, echoing like ghosts. Ungrateful. Cold. Selfish. But now I understood something they never did. Gratitude doesn't mean servitude. Love doesn't mean losing yourself. They called me ungrateful. But I had learned to be grateful for something far greater than approval. I was grateful for boundaries, the kind that don't divide, but protect. As Kendall and I drove out that morning, the sky opened wide over the mountains, sunlight spilling across the road ahead. I reached over, took her hand, and she squeezed it back. We didn't need words. The sound of the car engine, the mountain wind, and the faint hum of her voice as she sang along to the radio. It was all the closure I would ever need. And as the road curved ahead, I realized, peace isn't the ending of the story. It's what happens when you finally stop living someone else's. They say revenge burns everyone it touches. But sometimes it's not fire. It's the quiet choice to stop letting someone hurt you. I never needed them to apologize or fall apart or suffer. All I needed was to remember who I was before they taught me to be small. Peace didn't come from punishing them. It came from forgiving myself for staying too long. And if you've ever loved someone who kept breaking you, tell me, would you walk away to protect your peace? Or would you keep holding on, hoping love could fix what was never yours to fix?